Hello, very good afternoon to you. Welcome to BBC News. Firefighters are tackling more than 100 separate fires along the west coast of North America, from Canada down as far as the US state of New Mexico. In California, 40,000 people in a single community have been forced to abandon their homes. The wildfires are known to have killed 5 people, 2 of them children, but many others remain unaccounted for. Caroline Davis reports.
With the force to pull trees from the earth and overturn cars, gale-force winds have turned this Californian wildfire into what survivors called a tornado of flame. It's torn through forests and buildings, forcing nearly 40,000 to flee their homes and offices in just one town, including one local TV station.
We are going to leave the station because it is now unsafe to be here.
From the air and on the ground, firefighters are trying to control the blaze in and around the city of Redding, but stopping it has been difficult and dangerous. The winds were so strong, the fire jumped the Sacramento River.
To fight fire in rugged country, we're used to doing that. But when it blows into a whole community or a city, it's a whole different element.
This is the devastation it leaves behind. Many who left don't know if their homes are still standing. Some chose not to leave at all.
Homes were exploding, cars were exploding, and I have a wife and kids, and I said, I better FaceTime my wife just in case. I didn't let her know why I was doing it, but I wanted to see her face one more time.
5 people have died in the fire so far, including an elderly woman and her 2 great-grandchildren aged just 4 and 5. The fire moved so quickly it's been difficult to know who escaped and who didn't. At least 12 people are reported to be missing. This is just one of 130 wildfires burning across North America, and as the dry weather continues, so too does the danger. Caroline Davis, BBC News.
Well, our North America correspondent James Cook has sent us this update from Redding in North California.
Well, this fire continues to burn. It swept into the city of Redding, jumping across the Sacramento River and leaving very severe destruction behind it, not just in that city, but in other communities along the way, including Shasta, an old gold mining town where some properties were destroyed. It's been tragedy too. We know that 2 young children and their great-grandmother were among the people who died. 2 firefighters also were killed. One of those was a bulldozer operator who was 81 years old. And now the firefighters' attention is out here. We're further west and south from Redding now. The fire is moving in this direction. It is a very, very large blaze still, and it is one of perhaps 7 or so major fires now burning here in California, and some 90 that are burning across the western United States, and in fact as far across as Colorado and New Mexico. There have been fires too in Canada, perhaps 40 major fires in Canada, and way up in Alaska. But perhaps Oregon actually has been hardest hit. It has the highest number of significant blazes at the moment. What's extraordinary about this is how unextraordinary this is becoming. Year after year now in the United States and further afield in North America, we are seeing significant large blazes, and scientists say there are a number of reasons for that. First of all, human activity building out into the wildlands, a century of attempting to suppress those fires, allowing fuels to build up, allowing trees to grow more densely, and so when there is a fire it's more devastating. But also natural weather patterns. There's been drought in California, parts of California for years. And, of course, climate change, which many scientists say has had an effect.
James Cook there in Redding in Northern California. Now here the government is looking at making political adverts online more transparent so people know who's behind them. It also wants to crack down on online abuse against candidates in elections. Follows the publication of a report into the extent of fake news on social media and its impact on the democratic process. Here's our political correspondent Susana Mendonça.
What's real and what isn't? In the digital world, it can be difficult to pick out what's fake news. Revelations that people's personal data was being harvested by a company called Cambridge Analytica to influence the US elections through social media outlets like Facebook has raised questions about the impact on democracy. A committee of MPs is calling for the rules to be made clearer amid concerns about foreign meddling in British elections.
This is something you see in the palm of your hand every time you pick up your smartphone and go onto your Facebook app. So it's much more intrusive than before. But secondly, it's not always clear who is advertising to you. The reason the Russians could abuse Facebook to run ads to target people in elections was because you didn't know that's who was doing it.
The report looks into the kinds of adverts sent to users during the EU referendum. It calls for the creation of a register that allows everyone to see the messages that have been targeted at others and makes it clear where adverts have come from. But does fake news change the way you vote?
There's little evidence to show that it definitely has an impact, because that's a very difficult thing to measure, but it certainly has the potential to influence both how someone votes in terms of their views and which side they support, but also whether they turn out to vote or not, which are both crucial elements in an electoral contest.
Facebook's been sending its own adverts out to tell users what it's doing to combat fake news, and it told the BBC that it's working on ways to authenticate and label political ads in the UK. Meanwhile, the government has announced plans to make social media a safer place for election campaigning.
This is putting people off from going into public service and putting voters off from taking part in politics. So what we're doing is a couple of measures that we hope will really help to get voters to be informed, well informed about digital campaigning, but also to be able to be protected from intimidatory behaviour during elections.
Labour said the government needs to wake up to the new challenges we face to make sure that future campaigns and elections can't be abused or manipulated. Susanna Mendonça, BBC News.
At least 14 people have died and more than 100 others have been injured after a 6.4 magnitude earthquake struck a popular tourist destination in central Indonesia. Residents and tourists poured onto the streets and into open fields to try to escape damaged buildings on the island of Lombok. The tremor was felt in Bali, 60 miles away. Our correspondent Catherine da Costa has more.
Buildings and lives shaken to the core. This was the scene dozens woke up to in northern Lombok. The distress clear to hear. The quake, measuring 6.4 on the Richter scale, was quickly followed by over 100 aftershocks. The jolt was felt 60 miles away on the holiday island of Bali.
People in Lombok now, they still stay in the backyard, field yard, just to waiting for the aftershock, because now there is 85 aftershocks happened during the previous shock, so they are still waiting to the calm condition.
Many buildings have been damaged. It's thought at least 40 people are injured. Many are still being treated after being hit by falling debris. A Malaysian tourist who was on a hiking trip is reportedly among those killed. The epicentre of the earthquake struck 30 miles northeast of the city of Mataram in the north of the island. Indonesia is prone to earthquakes. It lies on what's called the Ring of Fire, the line of quakes and volcanic eruptions that circle virtually the entire Pacific Rim. The region is on constant alert for tremors that might trigger tsunamis. This time, no alert was issued. The country's disaster agency says the main focus now is evacuation and rescue. Catherine da Costa, BBC News.
A mountain guide who was leading a trek on Lombok when the earthquake struck captured the aftermath on camera.
Right side!
You can see there the group of climbers he was leading trying to get down from Mount Rinjani as quick as they can. The clouds of dust are from landslides that were triggered by the earthquake. At least 60 people have died in northern India after floods there were triggered by heavy rain. Thousands have been affected by flooding in the state of Uttar Pradesh, which has caused severe waterlogging. Many people have been injured since heavy rains and lightning began on Thursday. One city building collapsed. After suffering an unprecedented heat wave which killed at least 300 people, Japan has now been battered by a powerful storm moving across the country. The storm has injured at least 21 people, disrupted flights, road and rail transport and cut power to thousands. Residents in the south of the country have been warned to evacuate their homes because up to 200 millimetres of rain are forecast to fall over the next 24 hours. Now, in the Tour de France, Geraint Thomas is on the brink of becoming the first Welshman and the third British cyclist to win the event. He took a lead of 1 minute and 51 seconds into today's final day. Tradition dictates that the overall leader is never challenged in this last stage. Riders compete in a sprint finish on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. Well, our correspondent in Cardiff, Thomas Morgan, is gauging reaction to Geraint Thomas's victory.
As you can see, people coming in with their Welsh jerseys on in celebration mode, ready for Geraint Thomas to cross that finish line. Just last night, actually, many of Wales' most famous buildings were lit up in yellow, already beginning the celebrations for what is truly going to be one of the most historic days in Welsh sporting history. And standing beside me here is Alan Davis. Alan, the head coach of the Maindy Flyers, where Geraint first began his cycling career. And from what I understand, it was almost by luck that he actually started cycling, came out of the swimming pool, saw the cycling track, and then next week he came along.
Yeah, that was it. And that's really what the club is all about. It was designed, it was Debbie's idea to get kids into cycling who hadn't been cycling before. Before that, really, it was only youngsters whose parents or family had a history of cycling that got into the sport. The whole idea of the club is to bring other kids in and introduce the sport to them.
And of course, when Geraint first started, the cycling pathway wasn't quite as easy as it is now. And from what you were just telling me just now, he was actually rejected earlier on in his career.
Yes, just as Geraint was getting to about 14, the British Cycling came up with their very first talent programme. And they tested a number of youngsters. Geraint was tested once, and they decided that he wasn't quite good enough. But he was in good company because Mark Cavendish was tested twice, and they decided he wasn't good enough either.
Incredible, really, when you think about it. He's a double Olympic gold medalist, Commonwealth gold medalist, 3-time World Championship, and this is, well, clearly the cream on the crop. When you first met him, was there any signs that, you know, he was someone that could really progress to being one of the world's greatest cyclists?
I think in the very early days, no. And I defy anyone to say you can look at an 8 or 9-year-old child and say they will be a Tour de France champion.
Not the same as kind of football or rugby, where talent is maybe easier to spot, maybe that age.
You can see that he was a natural athlete. He had a fantastic athlete. And by the time he was 12, he was the kid to beat. If you were going to win a race in Wales, Geraint was the one you had to beat. But even then, we've never had a Welsh champion before. We have nothing to benchmark it on. No blueprint that we could say, oh yes, do this. He is now the blueprint in the club. Oh yeah, Geraint did that. Geraint was like this. And he's inspired others throughout. When he won gold in 2008, we had a young Eleanor Barker and a young Owain Doull in the club, who went on to then win gold themselves in 2016.
More champions, and you've also got more champions coming through the ranks in Maindy Flyers as well, I understand.
Yeah, we've got some very, very good youngsters coming through. Two girls who are daughters of Magnus Backstedt, an ex-Tour de France rider, Paris-Roubaix winner, who are outstanding cyclists. We've just had a young lad get a silver medal in the National Under-14 Championships this year. And again, in that younger age group, under 12s, the bubbly enthusiasm these kids race with, you think, yeah, there's going to be some good cyclists there.
Brilliant stuff. Well, enjoy the day, enjoy what's going to be an historic day. We must remember, of course, that Geraint Thomas was 2-3 years older in school years than two of Wales's, possibly until this week, more famous athletes in Gareth Bale, footballing star in Real Madrid, and Sam Warburton, recently retired Wales and Lions captain. But no doubt this win for Geraint Thomas will put him up there, maybe surpass them. Questions now on social media: is this the most, well, the biggest sporting achievement by any Welshman? And is this actually a golden age for Welsh sport?
Interesting questions there posed by Thomas Morgan, and we'll be hearing more from Thomas in about an hour or so as Geraint Thomas performs his victory lap in Paris. Right, it's now 16 minutes past 5. We'll take a look at the headlines on BBC News. 5 people have died, hundreds of buildings have been destroyed, and tens of thousands of people have fled their homes as wildfires rage across Northern California. People who abuse others online and who try to intimidate election candidates and campaigners could be barred from public office, the government says. At least 14 people have been killed in an earthquake which struck the popular Indonesian tourist island of Lombok. Now, a Labour MP who is being investigated over his behaviour during a row about the party's anti-Semitism code has denied screaming abuse at a fellow MP. Ian Austin is facing possible suspension after the argument with party chairman Ian Lavery. Speaking on The World this weekend on BBC Radio 4 this lunchtime, he said he was upset by a decision taken by the party not to adopt the standard definition of anti-Semitism in its entirety. That's for Labour's new code of conduct. Mr Austin added that he was ashamed of Labour.
I said that I thought the Labour Party's failure to adopt I said I thought the NEC's decision was a disgrace. Look, am I upset about anti-Semitism? Yes, I am. I am upset about that, and I'm upset as well about the leadership's failure, I think refusal really to deal with this properly. I grew up listening to my dad tell me how he'd escaped from the Holocaust and how his mum and sisters were murdered in Treblinka, and that led to me joining the Labour Party as a teenager, determined to fight racism. And the first thing I did when I became an MP 13 years ago was to organise and lead a campaign to drive out the BNP here in Dudley. And I'm really shocked, that a party that's got a proud tradition throughout its entire existence of fighting racism has ended up causing such huge offence and distress to the Jewish community in Britain. And I think this could never have happened before. I'm appalled that it's happened. I'm ashamed of the Labour Party. I really am. And I think, if I'm honest, I think we're becoming a different political party. I think this just could never have happened in the past.
Our political correspondent Susanna Mendonça has been following the story.
Ian Austin actually has a family history with regards to anti-Semitism because his own grandmother, as we understand, his aunts also died in the Holocaust, and he was brought up by refugees from the Holocaust. So he has a personal interest in this issue. Now, he says that the row that has led to this disciplinary action was as a result of him being unhappy with Labour's stance on anti-Semitism, because Labour took on a new code of conduct which has upset several Labour MPs and also many within the Jewish community. We had several Jewish newspapers coming together criticising it just a couple of weeks ago.
And of course, Margaret Hodge, the veteran Labour MP, having a kind of a stand-up row with Jeremy Corbyn on exactly this issue.
And it's on this very issue. So Margaret Hodge, she is another who is being investigated, and so we understand now that Ian Austin is also being investigated. A Labour source said that the investigation is not about anti-Semitism, it's about aggressive behaviour, but the aggressive behaviour that is referred to, well, Ian Austin denies that any of that actually happened.
Look, I was involved in, it was a heated conversation about the Labour Party NEC's failure to adopt the standard definition on anti-Semitism. But the accounts of it that have been given out are not true. I mean, did I scream abuse at anybody? No, I didn't. It was a heated discussion, I accept that. But I didn't scream abuse at anybody. I didn't do that.
The heated discussion that he's talking about there was had with Ian Lavery, who's the party chairman, who's somebody who's very much loyal to Jeremy Corbyn. I suppose, it's one person's word against another. We're not sure exactly what happened there, but certainly the fact that Ian Austin is now being investigated with these complaints against him, I suppose adds fuel really to those Labour MPs who are concerned that actually the focus needs to be on I suppose, disciplining those who are guilty of anti-Semitism within the party rather than having a go at those who are criticising the party's position on it. Now, we heard from Richard Bergen earlier on today, the Shadow Justice Secretary. He told us that he just wants them to get on with it, that he thinks that needs to be the focus, that they need to be disciplining those who are committing anti-Semitism within the party. That's something that certainly has been of concern to the party's Jewish community, and it's something that the party has struggled to move on from, really.
That's Susanna Mendonça, our political correspondent. Now, it was a video that went viral and a punishment that was widely condemned when footage emerged of a Palestinian teenager, Tamimi, slapping and kicking an Israeli soldier in the occupied West Bank. She was later imprisoned. She was 16 at the time. A short time ago, she was welcomed back to